Welcome to the Science of Kindness podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Chris Culver, and I'm so grateful that you've joined us today. We share real stories and give you tips, tricks, and strategies to fit kindness into your life. Enjoy and know that you are a bright light in this world. Hey friends, and welcome back to the Science of Kindness podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Chris Culver, and I'm so excited you joined us today as we're discussing kindness as a choice. And I know that could be a wild concept that you might be thinking about, like, is it really a choice to be kind? And it is. And I think when we look at it from a lens of what Houston Kraft calls confetti kindness versus deep kindness, both are intentional choices. Confetti kindness is the kindness of opening the door, smiling at a stranger, right? Those things that we see in our daily interactions and in our conversations and just human nature. And I think those are the simple choices we can make. But the deeper kindness is that choice of asking questions, assuming positive intent, and really seeking to understand. But both examples, whether you're looking through this lens of confetti kindness or deep kindness, it does require this deep consideration and this choice. And so let me frame this even more personal example for you, if you will. I have shared on this podcast my childhood. I was raised in a divorced family, and my stepdad was very adamant that I was going to play a sport. And listen, I think I've told the story that my only time of being celebrated on a sports team was when a kid behind me in fourth grade had a basketball, and I asked to borrow it for my school picture when I was wearing this fabulous 1990s windbreaker tracksuit. And my mom, when I brought that school picture home, thought I made the basketball team. So I share this with you that I have absolutely no athleticism. Like that's just not who I am. Like that, not because I haven't tried, because here's the deal. My stepdad was determined that I was going to play a sport. He thought I was tall enough for basketball. He thought I was broad enough for football, but really neither of those sparked my interest. And I think I've shared vulnerably here too that when I was in kindergarten, first grade, it was really young. I played soccer, and when the coach would ask, does anybody want to be taken out? I would always volunteer and raise my hand with another young lady on the team, and we would sit on the sidelines and eat the snacks. So listen, like I just wasn't called to the sports. That's just not who I was. And my stepdad was super adamant. He thought I was tall enough for the basketball. He thought I was broad enough for football. But neither one really sparked my interest. And so in middle school, my stepdad brought me a set of golf clubs. He decided that I was going to play golf. He bought this set of golf clubs, and he decided I was going to play golf. And he also bought this golfing net. And what he had decided was that every day when I came home from school, I was going to take a bucket of balls and I was going to hit these balls into the net to practice my golf swing that he had taught me on Sunday. And I was going to leave the balls there whenever I finished hitting them into this net. That was the kind of the agreement. Well, I don't know that it was an agreement, to be honest with you. I think it was more, that's what he said was going to happen. Naively and almost reluctantly as well. Like I went out after school and I hit those balls into the net. And I think that happened for a couple of days. And then something sparked within me and I was like, wait a minute, this is silly. Like I don't enjoy this. This is not fun for me. Like why am I hitting these balls for more of a compliance-based measure? And so I made a choice, and the choice was to dump the balls into the net every day, right? So it was this illusion almost that I was still hitting the balls because there really was no way to check. And this time we didn't have cameras, we didn't have ring light, we didn't have ring doorbell, we didn't have all those things. It was just more of an integrity. And yes, I recognize at the core I was making the choice to lie and be deceitful to my stepdad. But don't worry, friend. It comes back tenfold and gets me. So one afternoon, my stepdad comes home from work and he says, hey, we're going to go play golf at the par 3. Now, mind you, I had been practicing this golf routine for months, quote unquote, in his mind. So when we get out to the par 3, friends, it is a disaster. I can't hit the ball anywhere. He's getting frustrated. I'm getting frustrated. And I have to vulnerably admit that I did not practice hitting these balls into the net, that I had just been dumping. So, I mean, his anger is through the roof. But I will tell you, after we both come to a space of calm, right? And I think he was angry just because of disappointment, and he laughed it off really quickly, which I found in some other situations in my life are quite comical, because there were other moments that were much smaller where he had escalated larger, and I thought this was a pretty big thing. I had been deceitful, I had lied, and I know I had disappointed him in the aspect of not wanting to play a sport, but he still made the choice of calming down, and he just said, you know what, Chris, like I recognize at this point, like sports are just not it. And I share this story because he wasn't angry. He wasn't harsh. He wasn't those probably those immediate attributes that we expect to come to play. He really chose kindness over criticism. He chose to have grace instead of judgment. And I think he realized, man, we have tried it all, and he just is not interested in this space. And I think in those moments, as I reflect, because when you're this age in middle school, you don't have most of us don't have the skills or the strategies or the insights to make some of the connections that we do as we get older. And so as I think about this story and really this life lesson and experience, it took me back to kindness. Kindness is one of the most misunderstood words, one misunderstood language that we experience. Like, we talk about it as it's soft, right? As I opened up our conversation today, it was really about defining what is confetti kindness and what is deep kindness. And we consider kindness as that confetti kindness, that soft, simple, obvious kindness. It's the manners we're taught as a kid, saying yes ma'am, no sir. And I don't know about you, but probably in most of our generations that are listening, and those of us that have parents or grandparents, understanding that generational understanding of, is it being seen being more so than heard? And that's really shifted, right? And that's another thing that we have to understand, because kindness is not a personality trait, right? It's not a nice to have, but it truly is essential. And the assumptions that it's weak or that it is something that is soft is really inaccurate and creates a lot of obstacles, because it keeps us from seeing kindness as the profound world-shaping force that it is. And I appreciate my stepdad in that moment being kind and not losing his mind in the way that I thought he could. And sure, you can dismiss that moment of kindness as soft, or you can dismiss any kindness really as a nice to have. But I want to drill down into some research. There was a research study done in 2013 that said when we help people, that when we are able to give kindness to someone, it directly improves our mood and it reduces depressive symptoms. And I think about, in a world in which we're super disconnected, 1 in 10 adults say they're lonely. 1 in 5 children say that they don't have friends. 50% of adolescents say they're lonely. I think about how these kind connections really can be the choice that would make people feel seen, heard, valued, and respected. And you've heard me say this on the podcast before, that those are human nature attributes. Like, we are wired as humans to be seen, to be heard, to be valued, and to be respected. And there's a research study done in 2012 that says that when we perform acts of kindness, it increases happiness and life satisfaction. And there's also additional research that's out there. I believe it comes from Houston Kraft, who talks about how when someone sees kindness and experiences kindness and observes kindness, they are 75% more likely to be kind. And that's not unique to just our life experiences as a family member, as a child, as a parent, but it's also unique to the sense of a workforce or a workspace, because Gallup found research that showed that when employees feel cared for, they're more engaged and more productive. And I know that for a long time, we've been taught that fear is the way to get results, but really it creates temporary results, and there's no creativity, there's no trust, and there's really no long-term solutions. And when we choose kindness, right, when we choose to either have that confetti kindness of engaging and having presence, or we have that deep kindness of asking questions, assuming positive intent, and seeking to understand, it really does make the difference for someone to walk in fear, that fight or flight mode, or to feel like a safe space where they can try things, be innovative. And I share that through the workspace lens, but that's not unique to that space. That could be in education, that could be in a nonprofit, that could be in a business, but more importantly, that could be with your friends, that could be with your family, that could be with your children, right? This choice of kindness is not unique to one space. It really is universal, and it's our responsibility to see that. Students who experience kindness, they are more likely to attend school, achieve at higher rates, and persevere, which is really important. We've moved away from a play-based childhood to a phone-based childhood as we sit here in 2026. And why is that important? Because if you think about it, when you and I were growing up, for a lot of us, when we were outside after school, we were told, don't come inside until the lights come on. Like, that was just kind of the norm. Like, go play outside with your neighbors, go play with your friends. And I had an experience where I was working with a rural school district here in Oklahoma, and a friend of that district I call a teacher who was working there a friend because I really believe we need friends and we're all friends. So a friend of that district was sharing with me that she had another friend who had let their children outside to play and the police were called on her because there was no supervision. Vastly different than when we were growing up. I know that experience is probably not one that we can even understand, but that's where we are. And so I share vulnerably that we've moved away from this play-based childhood to a phone-based childhood. And what this has done is it's limited our executive functioning experience. It's also limited our exposure to teamwork, cooperation, conflict resolution, how to win, how to lose, all of these things. And we had these experiences as a child, we were able to persevere. We were able to build these key characteristics around resilience and grit and tenacity. And it's harder now because we don't experience this frequently in a digital age world. And so students are looking for that in schools. And one of the things that we talk about with educators is we have to teach these character traits. And sure, they're soft skills. They're probably not some of the things that we're going to find in our curriculum, but it's a choice we make to be intentional with 30 or 60 seconds to teach what does it look to have active listening skills? What does it look like to do these things, right? And we have to frame it as a choice. It is not one more thing. It's the thing that will change everything. Because think about if someone had the skill of understanding active listening, or someone understood the skill of teamwork and cooperation. How could that transform a classroom? How could that transform a business meeting? How could that transform a family dynamic, or even working with your children? These things are not unique to that space. And so when kindness is evident in any community, it reduces stress, it lowers crime, and it builds trust. And so there are a lot of myths to kindness that I want to debunk around this choice of kindness. And so one of the things that we have been taught over the years is that kindness means that you have to be agreeable. It means that we have to be agreeable to keep the peace. Adam Grant wrote a book and he shows us that productive disagreement, when we disagree with respect, when we do this with care, it leads to deeper understanding, stronger decisions, and more creative solutions. True kindness is not the avoidance of conflict, but it's the courage to enter into conversations with care. It means speaking with truth, setting boundaries, and holding others accountable for all forms of kindness when they are able to, because when we do that, it forms dignity and growth. The second myth that we hear a lot is kindness is a weakness. Mark Manson in his book reminds us that meaningful growth requires embracing the discomfort. Kindness demands strength, the strength to demand compassion when resentment would be easier. It's the choice to stay hopeful when it'd be easier to face a world of cynicism, right? It's not about the easier path, it's often the harder one. It's the one because you're not focused so much on feelings, but more so about the person and dignity. It requires us to rise above instinctive reactions and choose a higher response. And if you've ever heard me share a strategy that literally has changed my life, it's the 6-second pause. And that's in those moments of distress, in those moments of hardships, and we're having to decide the easy road or the hard road. There is power in pausing. And if you are thinking, I don't have 6 seconds, I'll meet you in the middle and let's do 3. But those intentional shifts, those moments of pause, those moments provide opportunity for clarity so that we are making the right choice to say, is the decision that I'm about to make rooted in dignity and helping other people, or is it going to fuel the fire, right? And as someone whose fight or flight response is to burn it down, which I have always said, I know it's not healthy. I'm working on that. These strategies do help me, and so that's why I share them with you. Another myth that is shared with us is kindness is the same as being liked. People who tie actions to popularity often sacrifice effectiveness. Daniel Coyle explains the most cohesive spaces are not built on superficial approval, but on trust and shared purpose. Kindness is a principle. It is not performance. It does not mean being recognized or rewarded in the moment. Its impact is lasting and impactful. And one of the things that I always pause to ask is, sure, we're making decisions right now, but what are the long-term benefits? What are the long-term reactions? What's going to happen in 7 years, 14 years, 7 generations, right? Whatever that may look like. And so sometimes we look to like, I'm going to be kind for immediate recognition, but sometimes kindness is not that. Kindness is choosing the hard road to know that the impact that you make will be later received or later obvious. Another myth that we're given is kindness is small. We tend to think of kindness as in these isolated acts, but the real power is systematic, right? The ripple effect that we're all so familiar with, it's highlighted deeply in Dr. Kelly Harding's book, The Science of Kindness, The Rabbit Effect, and she shows how care and connection influence not only individual well-being, but also health and longevity of entire communities. Kindness shapes our decision, institutional policies, and really even our cultural norms. It's not about gestures. And I think sometimes we get confused in that way. It's about building systems that really honor human dignity. And when we unlearn these myths of kindness, right? When we realize that these are myths and these are not truths, then we're able to practice kindness to its fullest expression. It allows us to see behaviors one way. It allows us to see what is strong and honest and what is deeply rooted in purpose. And when we strip away these misconceptions, kindness emerges not only as a social nicety, but as one of the most radical tools for change that we have. And I think something that we have to be mindful of and even reflective of is that there's research out there that says kindness is far more than a social virtue. It's a pathway to creating and achieving trust. And it's one of the most powerful drivers for a creativity, resilience, and performance. I vulnerably said at the beginning and throughout this show that sports was not it for me, right? I was not there for sports. And my stepdad could have easily lost his mind on that golf course that day, but he recognized that sports was not going to be the pathway for me. And he was a great supporter. I was in the arts. I was in every vocal music program and class and everything you can think of. I was in musical theater. That's kind of where I thrived and found my space in school. And I know my stepdad wanted me to be a sports player, but I will tell you, hats off to him, my mom, my dad, my grandparent, really everyone. They really embraced that, the makeup, the tights, all of it. They were like, you know what? We appreciate this is what he's going to do. And so they showed up and were there. And I really am grateful. I really am grateful for them being there during those times in which it could have been a choice to do something different. And when people choose kindness in that way, it cultivates positive emotions, right? So when my family was choosing to be kind and lean into this aspect of the arts over sports, that choice, right? Lots of choices. I always say we're one choice away from a totally different life. But in that choice, they evoked happiness in myself. And they didn't allow the dominance and fear to drive through. And I know that's a lot of us struggle because we are in this fast moving society. We're in this fast paced world. And so we feel like being kind is a weakness. It will cause us to lack a competitive edge. But the reality is that when we walk with kindness, we are able to make stronger and sound decisions that benefit not only ourselves, but other people, which is fundamental to human society and being successful. And listen, I know sometimes you're thinking that we frame this kindness piece as a choice, right? I've broken down some myths that are in the space around kindness, but I've also shared that kindness is this choice, that pausing moment to say, hey, is this what I'm about to do going to be helpful? We live in a world in which our inner critic is super, super loud. The external world around us, it rewards ambition, it celebrates busy over balanced, and it often mistakes productivity for purpose. And Jim Murphy in his book, it's called Inner Excellence, he frames this as what he calls the PALMS trap. And PALMS stands for possessions, approval, looks, money, and status. And he says that these 5 drivers often mask themselves as motivation, but in reality, they pull us further away from peace. And we may chase them, and they may look successful on the outside, but we are quietly unraveling on the inside. And he says that PALMS is seductive and it's super sexy, but when we chase approval, we lose authenticity. This is when shame takes over, we stop thinking for ourselves, and we start following the loudest voice in the room. And I think it's really powerful that we talk about that, because when we do this, it ignites fear, and we move away from being aware and we're moved away into being more obedient. Being aware is how we break the cycle. We notice the role of palms play in our choices, and like again, we can choose differently. We can be rooted in our identity in something deeper than possessions. And kindness shows us that it's no longer a performance. It becomes who we are, and that's scary, and sometimes that's really hard to shift. During my years as an administrator, I worked with a principal who is really difficult, and I think I've talked about this individual on several episodes. And I remember a time when we were required to cater our own potluck dinner for parent-teacher conferences. And when the teacher and staff didn't thank her for providing some of the meal and coordinating this, she told the entire staff there'd be no more food for hospitality. And 6 months later, on the final teacher workday of the year, she brought donuts and made a point to stand at the front of the room and said, "I brought donuts today and I want everyone to thank me." And she paused and waited until people started to thank her for bringing these donuts. Here's the reason I share this story. We misunderstand kindness when we reduce it to fleeting gestures or isolated random acts. While those moments matter, kindness is more than a collection of small actions. It's a posture toward the world. It's the lens in which we view people, circumstances, and even ourselves. So when we rethink kindness, this is where it all begins, right? It means that it opens us up to new possibilities and that we may be able to question what we already know. That's where growth happens. That's where kindness takes place. Many of us has been taught that kindness is something we extend outward. But the truth is, until we choose kindness inwardly in the same way, we have to challenge assumptions that kindness is simply niceness. And that's not true. That really isn't true. When we choose kindness for ourselves, self-kindness, the willingness to treat ourselves with patience, forgiveness, and care, that is not selfishness. It is the foundation that makes kindness more sustainable. Without it, kindness becomes self-erasure. It becomes for approval rather than from the heart. Kindness is deliberate, it's values-driven, and it shapes our lives, our conflict, and our community. When we choose intentional kindness, we're acting from intentional care, from empathy, and from our values. We also respect others' limits while helping them be successful. We create peace and fulfillment and connection, and we make a healthy, meaningful difference. That could look like offering help to a coworker because they have time and you want to lighten the load. It could be listening openly to someone's views respectfully while sharing your perspective. It could be giving a thoughtful note or a small gesture simply to express appreciation. And it could be apologizing sincerely when you recognize you're a part in a misunderstanding. Kindness cannot grow without self-awareness, because when we extend kindness outward, we must be honest what is happening within us. Jim Murphy, in that book, Inner Excellence, reminds us that self-centeredness shrinks our vision until only the story we can see is our own, but self-awareness expands our view. It allows us to balance and have an understanding of others. It allows us to be driven by growth and by empathy and authenticity. It allows us to reflect and learn and adjust from feedback, build trust through empathy and from understanding, and consider how our choices, the choices of kindness or the choices of unkindness, impact ourselves and other people. These intentional moments are not selfish. They are forms of self-kindness and self-awareness. Self-awareness allows us to pause without reacting, right? And when we do this, it is not self-criticism when we are self-aware. It's the courage to see ourselves honestly so that we can lead intentionally. When we pause and reflect, we're not looking at it from a shame lens. We're looking at it from a 1% better lens. What is the choice I can make tomorrow to be 1% better than I was today, should this situation or experience represent itself? We have to remind ourselves of the value that we bring to the space. That's not selfish. That is being self-kind. Right? When we think of kindness in this way, our significance grows, but also the power of kindness grows. If you're not writing self-affirmation, it isn't empty positivity, friends. It is brain training. Writing affirmations about ourselves rewires our neural pathways towards confidence, calm, and resilience. And as mentioned before, it is not selfish. It allows you to stay grounded, and it allows you to remember the value that you bring to this world. You can try some of these affirmations. I am enough exactly as I am. My presence brings peace and possibility. I release what I can't control and I focus on what I can. I am worthy of belonging even when I am still becoming. And kindness towards myself is not weakness, it's wisdom. When we speak truth to ourselves, we are rewriting how our brain hears it. Remember, when we talk positively to ourselves, we are filling in the white noise with positivity. We are naturally wired to fill in those blanks or the white noise with negativity. Affirmations allow us to be grounded, to remember that kindness is a choice towards ourselves and to other people. Choosing light and choosing kindness doesn't mean always being perfect. It doesn't mean that you're never going to feel stress, you're never going to feel fear, you're never going to feel disconnection. Light or kindness wavers, it flickers, and some days it feels incredibly small. But even the smallest spark still sparks. So as I mentioned a moment ago, we have to focus on the 1%. How can you be 1% better today than you were yesterday? How can you be 1% better tomorrow than you were today? Right? It's all about being 1% better. And when you are, you'll be 37 times better than when you started. Every day may not be a great day, but there's something great in every single day. And it's our responsibility to make sure that we're framing situations that may be harmful as events that are helping us grow and establish into the strongest people that we want to be. Every day, we face dozens of moments and experiences that challenge us and ask us to make a choice. Will you be the person who walks in kindness, or will you be the person who walks in unkindness? I want to take us back to that par 3 where I was with my stepdad that day. And as I told you before vulnerably, my stepdad could have taken the fear of frustration and no one would have blamed him, even not. But instead, he chose understanding. I think the piece that I want to hone in on through this entire episode is that kindness doesn't mean that you're always going to get it right or that we ignore what's wrong. It means that we choose connection over correction. It means we choose patience over pride. Sometimes the kindest thing we can do is stop forcing someone, including ourselves, to be something we're not. My stepdad's quiet choice that day reminded me that real kindness isn't about approval or performance, it's about acceptance. And in a world that so often asks us to prove our worth, that kind of kindness might just be the bravest choice of all. So my challenge to you, friend and listener and colleague and whatever your role may be, because you don't need a title to lead, how will you choose kindness? And how will kindness show up into your life? Because it is a choice. Kindness is a choice every single day, not a personality trait, but it can help shape your experience, change your life, and maybe even save somebody else's life. So will you take the challenge and choose kindness? Thanks for listening. Thanks for being here today. I'm always so grateful to share this space with you. I'm Dr. Chris Culver. Make sure you like, comment, and share and follow along on this journey. Share it out to friends who may resonate with this message and who believe in the power of kindness. And until next time, I'll see you around. If you can't find the light, be the light. And remember, sometimes the light you're looking for is the one that you carry on the inside.
The Science of Kindness podcast is hosted by Dr. Chris Culver. Our executive producer is Jake Doberens. This podcast was created in conjunction with Theophany Media.